Welcome to another 4-part series of The Opinion Piece. My name's Andy Stevens. I'm going to be your host for the next 4 episodes and got a fantastic guest in. Very lucky to have him. Very busy man. Mark Reynolds. Let me get this in the right order. So, Chairman and currently CEO of MACE and Co-Chair of CLC, Construction Leadership Council. Mark, thank you for fitting this in. I know you're a very busy man. Before we came on air, we obviously explained the 4-part that we're going to do. So just for the viewer, we're going to go through an industry overview of construction, then our images in industry and also licensing. And then the third part is training and apprenticeships and finishing with mental health. So we'll go straight into episode 1, industry overview. I was going to try and start with the positive, Mark, but I think looking at current media, Phase 2 Grenfell Report is obviously out. Government are going to be reacting in February, I believe. What are the major points you see coming out of this report, and how's the industry going to change for the better?
Well, in fairness, I think the industry has begun to change. So the number one thing, and Judith Hackett always says, is about behaviours. You know, we've got to get the behaviours right in the industry and people to acknowledge what is the right thing to do. The building regulations are the building regulations. They've been quite clear, and people have not followed them. You know, and that's corporately not followed them, and individually not followed them. So there is this whole issue around: have we really understood what we need to do to get our workforce properly prepared? Have we given people the tools and the information? I mean, there has been some behaviours in there around mis-selling of products. Yeah. But I think generally now, if you ask me today what's happened in the 7 years since, I think everyone is now in tune about the behaviours. It hasn't gone right down and embedded through the industry, but I think many senior leaders in the industry know that they've got to follow the rules. For me personally, despite the tragedy, you cannot ignore the tragedy of what's gone on, not just Grenfell, but in other fire issues. We as an industry have to make our buildings safe for people to live and work in them. Yeah. Number one. And I think people understand that and they will want to do that. So in terms of, there's lots of things the industry has done. So around product safety, you know, have we really looked at these critical safety elements around changing facades, changing dry lining, making sure we've got safe compartments? People have made changes. We haven't gone quick enough. And that's one thing that government and industry need to sort out together. In terms of competency, which I know we're going to talk about later, there's a tremendous amount of work going on about upskilling the workforce and making sure that they've got the accreditation scheme so they can demonstrate that they are skilled and competent people. So I think it gives us a platform for major change going forward. There are a number of aspects in the recommendations, the inquiry recommendations. I think there's 58 of them. There's a number of fundamental which apply to the construction sector rather than just the property. As the Construction Leadership Council, we've looked at those. We've looked at all of those recommendations. We're working through them and saying which ones we've started the journey and which ones we need to adapt, change, pivot and move forward. So it still is a big issue for us. I think the major issue is going to be around our products, because our alignment with the EU has changed. Obviously, coming out of the EU, Brexit, there was a requirement initially for CA marking. Mm-hmm. That's quite frankly been kicked into long grass. Now we're back to CE, which is actually a good move for the industry because we've got parity. So companies have not got to retest. What we need to do is follow the EU regulations and make sure we apply it to the new building regulations, because most of them stand in place, but work to the regulators' requirements. I have a lot of time for what the building safety regulator are doing. We as CLC meet with them weekly to look at their challenges. They're standing up a new organisation. They're putting in place a new digital platform. They're bringing on new people. And anyone who goes from a startup with all of that will know how difficult that is under the spotlight of Grenfell. So I think we've got a lot of things to be positive about, but it is change that's needed.
I could probably spend about 3 hours picking up on each point there. But we want to try and go through this, and hopefully another time we can maybe look at it in more detail. Carillion, ISG, rumours of others. What do you feel, sort of Construction Leadership Council hat on? What do you feel, is there stuff being put in place to prevent others falling? Because the knock-on effect, lads not being able to get their tools off-site because their gates are locked and obviously no income. We can't have another one, can we?
Well, sadly, I think there will be several. And, let's look at the structure of the industry. If we have contracts in place that with a low margin industry, if you have an onerous contract which the contractor can't deliver, then it'll happen. If you don't pay people on time, it will happen.
That's huge. Sorry to interrupt, but obviously, Ben, as you know, residential background, getting knocked as we call it. I think we could solve so many problems from mental health companies going bust if we can get this payment terms, schedule, supply, whatever you want to call it. Because it's mad that he can wait 180 days plus.
That's ridiculous. It's not fair. So a couple of things. So, we need fair contract terms that are workable and proportionate to what is being delivered. The risk is being taken. So, I won't go into the detail of that, but just to talk about fair payment terms. I was on the London 2012 Deputy Programme Director the best part of 5 years. Fantastic programme. I always say it's the worst job I've ever worked on and the best by far. We put in place payment terms 18 days. No retentions. We had people who wanted to work on that
program. You'd have people queuing up to work.
Yeah, we had people working on that programme. And 18 days was a bit of a challenge, but 30 days, you can easily manage 30 days. I'm a huge fan of duty to report. It has seen the industry improve immeasurably. No one likes to be down the league table seeing that they're not paying in 30 days. Carillion had some bad behaviours, the whole thing around paying 120 days, and you could be paid early if you had some insurance behind it. Paying out of order. I'm not a fan of it. We'll deal with some issues that, again, government letting large contracts to people. If for example, I gave you 5 contracts and you had £10,000 in the bank, but you had a mortgage that was redeeming, and you had to pay in 9 months' time £1 million, and you got no means to do it, no cash, no workload, you're going to go bust. The writing was on the wall with Carillion in their annual accounts. Government didn't read it. Government did not get behind it. The ISG situation's slightly different, but they all have the same impact. There's a ripple effect where they hold retentions on their supply chain. My brother has a small supply chain. He's been knocked £18,000 by ISG. How many people have been impacted on that?
I load, sadly. Yeah.
But and we will touch on this with mental health as well. But those retentions are lost to those people. That's a lot of money to any individual. Some of it's in the millions.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a ripple effect because they then go, well, I can't get my trade credit insurance. There's a company gone into receivership this week, couldn't get trade credit insurance. Bank won't extend their loans. And there's a time bomb to all of this, and particularly it affects SMEs and micros, where, as an individual, you can't say anything. You can't say, I've got a cash problem.
No.
So what happened? Because otherwise you don't get any work.
Yeah.
So as an SME micro, the first thing you do is try and protect your business, pride in your business. You're looking after small people, smaller group of people, and they're probably your friends. So you're trying to keep them going. So you mortgage your house. And then you get another hit 6 months later. Then you lose your house. You've lost your company. You lost your worth. You lost your purpose.
Probably lose your family.
Yeah, and then they wonder why we have mental health issues. So the structure of this needs to change.
Does it need to come from government?
I think it comes from both. It comes. I hate to say this. When I was appointed by the Construction Minister Lee Rowley at the time, his first request to me in the 15-minute discussion I had with him, he said, Mark, I would like you to sort out retentions because government cannot do this. Now, I've tried in 3 years to sort out retentions. There are parts of the sector who will just not, including government, some government departments, who will just not remove retentions. We have the infrastructure side, which is NEC, which has no retentions. We have the JCT contracts, have retentions in them. And because they're 5 colleges, or the 5 colleges that demand what they want, they insist on retentions. So house building and commercial, they insist on retentions. I don't know why. They shouldn't be. They don't need to. The people they employ, the frameworks they have can have different commercial arrangements. You can manage it through the contract. But if you're only earning, you're earning 3%, 5% margin, and you're being held 3%, you're working for nothing. When you finish the job, you get 1.5%, and then you might get the 1.5% back in a year, 2 years' time.
I'm not great at maths, but I can't remember the company that I saw recently as tier 1, turnover of billions, net profit of 17 million. My brain's saying, okay, it's come into the plus from the negative, but is that not a worry?
Yeah, I have a slightly different view of this. Look at the return on the real capital they employ. But if they're a tier 1, I would say, the bulk of their cost is 15% of that revenue. So the real cash that they're paying out is for their own people and their overheads. The rest is actually being paid for through the project. The problem is when the project doesn't perform, and that's the issue. So for the bulk of it, it works, but actually, ideally the industry really needs to be working on a 5% profit, ideally.
Minimum.
Yeah, as a minimum.
Yeah.
But if you got your overhead on top of that, so, some of the civils contracts, and I know High Speed 2 had a lot of criticism, but they mandated that you had to be at 7.5% as a minimum. Very sensible. People can cope with that. People get paid fairly. They put project bank accounts in place. Again, I'm not a huge fan of project bank accounts.
Is that like escrow?
Yeah, it's like an escrow. So
I thought residential would be brilliant. I've finished.
Yeah.
We did finish this house. It won loads of awards, and banker working in the city, house worth millions. And he looked at me at the end and went, "I ain't paying that last bit. Take me a call."
Yes.
And it was 23.5 grand, which is basically the profit on a big job.
Yeah.
I didn't have the money or probably they didn't have the headspace or time. Certainly didn't have the staff, and I think getting that sorted residential-wise would be good. But just want to look at very quickly, again, I have used a calculator, 300,000 new homes a year, 24 million out to 28.3 million, roughly, to be upgraded 2050, net zero. Approximately, I've worked that out, 3,500 homes a day across both have to be completed. Is that absolute pie in the sky? Because from where I'm sitting at here, I'm looking at lack of skilled labour, aging workforce, companies going bust, red tape.
Well, let's deal with the barriers to begin with. I think you're right. If everyone's sitting there at the moment and said, do they believe it's achievable? I think we'd all say no. So
should we look at this as a longer term view? Forget 300,000. Let's look at it as perhaps we need this number of homes in 10 years. Let's get more apprentices in. Let's build the workforce up. Or is it good to have it per year?
Look, I'm always a fan of targets. Now, do you do sport? I do sport as well. So, I am a fan of targets. And if you don't set yourself an aspirational target, you will never get there. Mm-hmm. So what are the things that we need to do to unlock 300,000 homes in well, it's actually going to be 350 really, 350.
Yeah,
so more. So let's break it down and let's say, okay, how do we do this? First of all, we've got to sort out planning. Got to remove the planning barriers. Got to make it strategic, and you've got to really drive through the planning. The next thing we've got is an affordability issue. So I don't believe the current model will work. So with the current house builders, again, this is a personal view, but I don't believe the model is sustainable with the house builders earning what were earning 25% margins, now earning 15% margins. They have got a big remediation challenge that they need to earn decent margins to put that right. So let's not put them in a place that they can't deliver. But I think there is a different system. we can either choose to go back to council house building, or we can come up with a partnership homes model where the land is put in free of charge.
By government.
By government or local authority.
Local authorities haven't got any cash.
They've got land though, got lots of land.
Yes, that's...
They own lots of land, and we're working with a client, a brilliant client at Stevenage Borough Council. They are very forward thinking. I went to them and said, we have a problem. This has got an affordability challenge. We changed the model around. They put the land in free of charge. They're putting money into the scheme. They will deliver their homes. Just need to change the thinking. There are many, many projects around stimulated by local authority. And it does need some government change about how you then take the value of that property off the immediate balance sheet and put it in the long term. So I think actually structurally we could, if we really wanted to, shift the model and move it around. Now, you're not going to mobilise all those projects overnight. There is a real opportunity to bring real skilled trades in a short. It doesn't take a long time to train a bricklayer. A year, 2 years. You can get a good bricklayer, very competent in a couple of years. They can start on a project early. We have fantastic programs through the government. I chair a group called the Construction Skills Delivery Group. And we have put policy interventions in place that gives you flexi apprenticeships. So they can be block release, day release, or part-time in some shape or form. So it's very flexible. And there's 3 types of those. We can have a brokerage program. We put in place a brokerage program where if you don't have the confidence to employ the tradesperson, you can take it off the broker, skill them up, and then if you haven't got the next job, give them back and they could go somewhere else. They get paid by the employer. You pay them. It's a bit like being in football. Football or on loan, once you got them, you pay for them. When you haven't got them, it's paid for by the brokerage scheme. So it's a really good program. And this is where clients and local authorities can get together. And rather than say one individual do it, you do it through the programmatic view of saying, Hertfordshire County Council, we're going to build all of these homes. This is our program together. This is how we want the supply chain to come together. And this is really how we can support micros to become SMEs. That's what we want. We need to get micros to SMEs.
That was my final question of this first part, trying to condense it. But I do some developing when I have 2 minutes. I've been waiting over a year for the planning inspector to look at a roof. I can't sell that property because it's got an order on it.
Yeah.
We've tried the planning consultant. We've tried emailing and calling. It gets nowhere. Now, there's nothing to do with me, but there's obviously other little people doing stuff. And actually, in the end, you go, I'll just go and do something else.
Correct.
And there's so many micro and SME that are, as you know, really good. My view, very contagious. I'm going to get a lot of messages, I know. The smaller family-run new build design extension for properties built, I think, have generally better quality than your big national house builders.
Yeah.
And I think we should encourage the micro and SME. So how can we, I'm trying to wrap this episode up, how can we help micro and SMEs more? Now, I appreciate, obviously, CLC's more tier 1, tier 2, I get that, but, 98% micro SME, how do we give the backbone of the industry that support?
Well, firstly, CLC, it may appear it's for the tier 1s, but actually isn't. We have a working group to the Repair and Maintenance and Improvement Group. In the housing working group, we have an SME, so Chris Carr is absolutely brilliant. He has a small development business, housing development, and he does shine a light on the problems that we face. He did previously sit on the board before we restructured the CLC, so he does have a voice. Let's just talk about the things that we need to change. The planners are under-resourced. Yes, we have to acknowledge that planning system is under-resourced, it's underfunded. The people who actually use the planning system should pay more. We just aren't paying enough for the planning system. So that has to increase. We have to accept if we want to build homes, we want to redevelop our homes, we are going to have to pay more than your £300. It's just not right. So in order to get more people in, to be a really in a great career as well. I mean, there's some fabulous things, that planners do, and I've sat there personally trying to redevelop a home, and actually the output I got at the end was a far better output because of the planner's involvement than I got if I'd done it myself. I'd done what I wanted to do. So I'm always cautious about saying, "Oh, planners don't do a great job." Planners do a job and they hold us to account. Let's just make sure we know what we're doing. They need to be properly funded, properly resourced, and then we can get down to proper turnaround times. These service level agreements that we must have in place. So if you knew it was only going to take 4 weeks, you wouldn't mind. If you knew it was going to take 8 weeks, you kind of work to it. You can plan. So I think we have to have very clear SLAs, hold people to account, and be proportionate, appropriate to that. So funded properly, proper SLAs, people get information out, turn around quickly. And to some extent, that's what the building safety regulator is trying to get to. They've got an SLA turning around their Gateway 2 process. They know they're not hitting it. They know they've got to hit it. But when they get to their 12 weeks, the question is how to improve it. And my example about where it's working well is a new passport. You got your new passport lately? It's an amazing
Last one.
process.
A couple of years ago, I had mine redone.
Well,
But it's a lot quicker because I had my kids.
It's a lot quicker, and you know where you're going. You get a text. I got my text that your passport's coming. It's this, it's that. It was like, this is a pretty.
How long would it take to get that in construction?
Well,
Because it would be great, wouldn't it?
let's say we want to do that in the next 2 years. If we really got behind it, we could put that in place and to improve it. The SLA would be longer, but you then keep moving it down to get to a reasonable level. So I do think that's one way of unlocking the planning system. The next thing is, and you touched on a hobby horse one, I am going to be doing some work on this, and I did speak to our friends at Stevenage saying, how many homes have you got that are derelict, disused, unused homes? This is an easy way. I've read all sorts of figures, 2.6 million homes in the UK, not habitable. So let's just take this.
Yeah,
So if we can turn those homes, call it, you'll know better than I, call it 60,000 to bring it up to today's standard.
Keep going.
Right, 100,000.
It's going to be at least a one. Yeah.
Okay, 100,000. So let's put an air source heat pump here. You'll get £7,500 for that.
Yeah.
So you'll get that grant. Let's put a retrofit grant in. Or I bet still we don't charge you VAT on it.
That would be huge.
No VAT. This one, Andy, you and I should then start publishing. No VAT on disused homes, unoccupied homes. No VAT as a retrofit to bring it up to a green standard.
Agreed work to start in 4 weeks max.
Okay.
You could develop them, bang.
So why don't we lobby that to the Chancellor for the autumn statement in October?
And the biggest thing with that, from my point of view, being a trade, my dream job, no one living there. I haven't got little Johnny trying to play with a chop saw because the chippy's left it plugged in. Yeah. We've got an empty property, and I've worked out all the work we've done over the years. If you've got a family living in the house that you're extending or renovating, you lose about a day a week cleaning up, tidying, dusting, putting tools away, making sure the heating's back on if you've drained it down, all these little bits. So that, to me, is, I hate the expression, low-hanging fruit.
It is.
But it's a banker.
And then you can take, it's probably going to create 2.6 million homes. I'm stretching at the upper end here. Let's say 3 people per home. You just create a home for 750,000 people. How many people have been putting up in hotels?
And some of they can call home, which then helps with mental health and get back into work.
Exactly.
Right, sorry, Mark. I'm trying to keep this short, but we've got so much to talk about. End of episode 1. Next week, industry, image and licensing, probably more so for my background, residential. I was embarrassed to say to Mark when we were chatting before we started recording, I've never seen a CSCS card. I haven't got an apprenticeship and I've got no qualifications, but I've done reasonably well. So next week, industry, image and licensing.